We are here at RightsCon in Taipei. It is a summit organized by Access Now. And with us now is the Tech Legal Counsel with Access Now, Natalia Krapiva. Great that you could join us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, prior to working with Access Now, you worked as a prosecutor at Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. I want to sort of understand how effective the US courts are in limiting surveillance technology, because it's such a huge issue that's being raised here at RightsCon, the whole idea of surveillance technology and how it's infiltrating apps like WhatsApp.
Yes, actually, U.S. courts, or at least one U.S. court in California, has been at the forefront of this issue, actually limiting this type of harmful spyware technologies. There was a recent decision in December against a company called NSO Group, which is sort of notoriously
This
known.
is an Israeli tech company? Yep.
Tech company, that's right, selling their spyware technology to governments all over the world, and their technology was used to target WhatsApp and the WhatsApp's users. And so in this legal case that started now 5 years ago, and finally we got some decision out of it where the court ruled actually that was unlawful, was illegal for NSO Group to target WhatsApp and WhatsApp servers located in California. And so there will be now soon also trial on how much NSO will have to pay in damages based on this determination.
What are you expecting will be the outcome of that?
Well, I hope that they will be forced to pay up.
A lot of money?
A lot of money. Yeah. I mean, it might be difficult to actually get NSO as an Israeli company based in Israel with likely bank accounts in Israel to enforce this judgment, because they would probably have to go through again Israeli courts to enforce it. But I think in principle, it's actually something that's very good and it's unprecedented. It would be unprecedented.
Yeah. Can I ask you, I mean, do these court cases take such a long time and to make their way through the courts? But do you know, like, can you just give us in sort of layman's terms as the tech legal counsel, like what is the law that this case was based on? Like, what did the NSO Group actually infringe with respect to WhatsApp?
So there's several laws. There's a federal law, federal computer fraud a law, where you have to, if you violated federal legislation and by targeting computers or systems without any authorization, you violate. And there's also California law that's similar, computer fraud statute that is California, and WhatsApp were also able to get the decision that they also NSO violated
because they were
law.
Registered as a company in California.
Well, no, because they were targeting specifically servers located in California.
Okay, so it was the location of the servers. One of the things that we've talked about a lot is this question of jurisdiction. Like, court cases happen, traditionally the person who is the victim, the person who is the perpetrator, often in the same country, but you can have the server in one country, the perpetrator in another country, the victim, different platforms, the cable companies, the satellite, like all of these different players. How are you navigating that?
It's very difficult. It's a challenge. And in fact, there was a similar case that was brought by Knight Institute against the NSO, at Columbia. And that was a case based on actually our Access Now investigation jointly with the Citizen Lab into the hacking of journalists in El Salvador. And they brought this case saying, well, yes, the servers were hacked in California, which are Apple's infrastructure, but the victims were these journalists, and the victims are located in El Salvador. And so far, the court in that case said, no, you have to bring the case in either El Salvador, where the victims are, or in Israel, where the defendants are. And so Knight currently is trying to appeal this and say, no, you have U.S. servers affected. So it's very hard for victims to get justice either in Israel or in El Salvador, where you have an authoritarian government that targeted them. And so that's going to be for the courts to still decide.
And what about in Russia? What's happening behind the digital iron curtain there as far as censorship goes and surveillance?
Well, Russia doesn't have, at least to our knowledge, such sophisticated tools as Pegasus spyware. They have something that's sort of less technically complex, but nevertheless, it's quite effective, unfortunately, in getting the information and hacking activists and civil society actors. We recently exposed a hacking campaign that we believe is associated with the FSB, Russian Security Services, where they used simple email phishing, where they would send a link and you would click, or like a PDF document that where you try to open it, it asks you to input your credentials, and then they take over your email account. So that unfortunately is quite simple mechanism, but it's been effective, and unfortunately they are actively still using it against civil society, but also US and European NGOs and officials. So that remains to be a problem still.
Do you call this, is this transnational repression?
Well, yes. I mean, in some of this, at least some of the victims were in fact were in exile, so they had to flee the country because of the repression that's currently has intensified, especially since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So a lot of them had to flee, and they're based either in Europe or in US. But they also have still, some of them have staff in Russia for whom it is extremely dangerous to be exposed as still being engaged in journalism or in activism. And so I work with some of these victims, in fact, and they shared that it was extremely distressing for them to learn that they were compromised and that their staff who are in Russia are in danger, and they had to urgently evacuate them or take other security measures. So it's for some of them, it's really a life or death type of risk.
And has this increased since the death of Navalny?
I mean, there's something that, I mean, definitely the repression has been increasing steadily. I would say since the death of Navalny, we have seen, interestingly, internet shutdowns implemented during the funeral, for example, of Navalny, which is something new. And, Access Now, we document through our Keep It On coalition, we document internet shutdowns. And this is something that is kind of a new pattern that we see shutdowns.
What's new about it? Is it that they're shutting down domestically?
Well, that it is in response to
an incident.
A funeral.
Yeah,
like,
okay.
because people were attending
It's
the
pretty
funeral
hardcore, isn't
and
it? Like, we're going to shut
experiencing-
down the internet during a funeral.
Yeah, we don't want you to see this. We don't want anyone to get
Yeah.
agitated or elevated over this event. But of course, people would have been, because it was a significant escalation in oppression, really, wasn't it?
Yes, and I think it's hard for the government to kind of contain it, because definitely Navalny was very popular, and so they even allowed still for many people to come. And there was recently anniversary just not so long ago, first year anniversary since the death, and so they again allowed most people to come and to pay their respects, but there were already some detentions as well. So I think over time they will also start increasing again this repression and go after people who are trying to express their.
Do you think, like, when you think about, you talked about like the distressing nature of like what it means to be surveilled, and I think for people who haven't actually been, or with their knowledge anyway, people who haven't been tracked and monitored as surveilled, like, I've spoken myself to Irina Timchenko. She was one of the victims. But tell us what it's like. What do they say to you? What is the story of, what does it feel like? Where's the fear? Are you looking over your shoulder the whole time? Are you concerned about your community? You don't know what's been hacked. Like, what's the experience of the hackee, for want of a better word?
Yes, so I mean, Galina was one of those people who shared that it's similar to feeling like you're naked, you're stripped naked, and so you're exposed to everybody. It's you feel vulnerable. Another thing is, of course, is the fear for your colleagues. Again, because Medusa, they do have people that they talk to in Russia. So also a feeling of responsibility. Okay, now I expose these people and it's my fault somehow. And yes, and feeling like, what did I do wrong? Even though, as with Pegasus, it's a zero-click spyware where you don't do anything. You don't know that your phone is infected. It's not like you click on something, unlike phishing. And so there's nothing that the victim could have done differently to protect themselves, but they still feel that guilt. Another victim told me that they feel like it is similar to having some kind of a disease, sort of stigmatizing type of disease, infectious, that people kind of stay away from you, and then you also don't want to expose them, and it really ruins personal relationships, professional relationships, and impacts. And some people, some journalists, in fact, are quitting journalism after that, after those attacks.
Before you took on this job, you did a lot of work in the area of digital forensics. How do you trace the oppressor or the hacker? How do you find the person responsible for infecting your phone, for instance?
Well, I still do that work with our digital security helpline. It's ongoing work of mine. It is a challenge to do that, and I think there is a little bit of a misconception that you have to have all of those things in place in order to actually have a legal case or some kind of accountability. In fact, in most of the cases, especially with sophisticated spyware like Pegasus, it is designed in a way that it wouldn't be detected, to prevent detection. It's very sophisticated and smart. And so oftentimes we do not have that concrete evidence that, yes, we have indicators that we know this is a spyware, we know it's associated with this spyware, but we don't necessarily see who did it, right? And so we have to rely on circumstantial evidence, right? Who is the customer? Who is the victim? What is the type of actor that would target them, right? Because of the work they do, because of who they are. And so we have to rely on that kind of evidence oftentimes. And I think, and as a prosecutor before, we tell you circumstantial evidence is just as good as a physical evidence. So you can build a case and establish responsibility based on that kind of evidence.
That's so fascinating. And, I was in a session earlier today, which was around exactly what you mentioned now, the digital chain of custody, and like how when you're going to the International Criminal Court to try and demonstrate that there's, some sort of like international crime, and you have all of these different pieces and often unwilling partners as well in the tech sector, because they don't want to hand over the information that they have. So you're constructing a case with different parts of the jigsaw, and hoping that the judge will be able to see that, and sort of the results. But even not in a court case, but even in the reporting, I've noticed in a lot of these sorts of reports that come out on forensics, they don't actually say, Russia did it. They say
there's the culprit.
What they say is that, well, you tell us what they say. Like, if you don't know for certain, what are the sort of reporting frameworks?
It's something like likely is the most likely perpetrator, or we have evidence consistent with that this would suggest that probable. And oftentimes, as a lawyer in general, I would tell you, you don't never want to say 100%, because there's always some possibility, but you would usually use words like confidence, high likelihood, medium likelihood. So it's really a level, degrees of confidence here.
Is it becoming harder and harder to trace the culprit in these instances? You mentioned NSO and Pegasus; they're highly sophisticated. Are they developing new spyware to block you out and to stop that trail, if you like, of investigation?
Definitely. It's a cat and mouse game. Every time we expose them and burn their exploits and their methods, they find some new ways to target devices. And so then we have to recreate and find new ways of detecting them. And it's something that so far, though, civil society has been actually surprisingly good at. I mean, we have good partners like Amnesty Tech, like Citizen Lab, who are also highly sophisticated in their research, and our helpline as well. We are currently also ramping up our skill level. So I think it will remain to be this kind of chase where they keep coming up with new methods, and we expose them, and so it goes on.
Natalia,
and on.
we're going to have to close this talk down because you are so in demand that you've got to get to your next session, even though we'd love to continue to talk to you. Can you just tell us, in conclusion, like in your trajectory as an advocate and as an activist, and you've lived in this world of like spyware, and like, are we winning? Are we losing? Is it sort of the same? You say it's a cat and mouse game. We're like, where are we on the cycle?
I think I would end it on a positive note. I think the progress that we have achieved so far in recent years is astounding, because this is really the purview of, we're talking about national security, high secrecy, again, high level, skill level, that it's been very hard for civil society to keep up with. And now we also have had states and courts and companies in our block and fighting with us oftentimes and passing a regulation, passing court decisions. So it's really, I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic and keep on fighting.
Great to hear. Thanks, Natalia.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And thank you for all the work that you've done over many years to put us in that position of even to think optimistically about what's to come. Thank you.